Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is Daniel. I am 28 years old, and this story is about how the woman I thought I would spend my life with forced me to choose between her and my disabled brother. Growing up, my younger brother Ethan was the center of my world. When he was only 6, he was in a terrible car accident that left him permanently disabled. He suffered a severe spinal cord injury, and ever since then, he has been confined to a wheelchair. Our father left when we were teenagers, unable to handle the weight of responsibility, and our mom worked long hours just to keep food on the table. From that point on, I became more than just a brother to Ethan. I became his caretaker, his advocate, his protector. I bathed him, cooked for him, learned how to change medical equipment, and most importantly, I stayed by his side when everyone else turned away. He was not just my brother, he was my best friend. The person who laughed at my bad jokes, the one who stayed up late playing video games with me, the one who taught me more about resilience than any book or teacher ever could. By the time I met Jessica, my fiancée, I had already accepted that caring for Ethan was a permanent part of my life. She seemed to understand at first. We met at a mutual friend's party, and what drew me to her was her sharp wit and confidence. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and throughout that time, she had always been polite, even affectionate toward Ethan. She helped push his wheelchair when we went to the park, brought him small gifts during holidays, and even joined us for movie nights. I thought she loved him too, or at least respected the bond we share. When I slipped the ring onto her finger one cold December evening, I was certain I had found someone who accepted not only me, but the life I carried with me. But everything began to unravel when we started planning our wedding. Jessica became more demanding, more focused on image, and more critical of my time. She complained that I spent too many evenings with Ethan, that I prioritized his doctor appointments over date nights. I brushed it off as wedding stress, telling myself she would adjust once the chaos settled. But the real blow came one night when we were sitting in her apartment, finalizing guest lists. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read and said, "Daniel, we need to talk about Ethan." My chest tightened instantly. She said it so casually, as though she were asking about flowers or catering. But her next words shattered me. "If we're going to have a life together, you can't keep living with him. He's holding you back. I want us to start fresh, just the two of us. And that means Ethan can't be part of our home anymore." At first, I laughed nervously, thinking I had misunderstood. But she doubled down. She told me she didn't want to spend her married life taking care of a disabled man who wasn't her responsibility. She told me that I had already done my part as a brother, and that it was time to put myself first. My hand shook as I asked her if she realized what she was saying, if she understood that Ethan had nowhere else to go. She shrugged and said, "There are care homes, Daniel. People like him live there all the time. You can visit him whenever you want." Her words pierced me like knives. People like him, as though Ethan was a burden, a problem to be stored away out of sight. The room felt smaller with every breath I took. My mind flashed back to Ethan's smile, to the nights we stayed up talking about life, to the way he once told me that he was scared no one would ever love him because of his condition, but that he was okay as long as he had me. How could I betray that trust? I looked at Jessica, the woman I thought I would build a future with, and for the first time, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Her beauty, her charm, her laughter. It all seemed hollow when compared to the cruelty of her demand. I told her flatly that Ethan wasn't negotiable, that he was part of me, and anyone who wanted to marry me would have to accept him too. She exploded. She accused me of choosing Ethan over her, of being a martyr, of letting my crippled brother ruin my chance at happiness. Hearing her spit out those words made my stomach turn. I realized then that her affection for Ethan had never been genuine. It had been a mask, a performance to win me over. The rage that boiled inside me was mixed with heartbreak. I had given this woman my heart, my trust, and my future, and she had revealed herself to be someone who saw my brother as nothing more than dead weight. That night, I left her apartment without another word. I drove home to the small house Ethan and I shared, tears blurring my vision, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When I walked through the door, Ethan looked up at me with his usual bright smile and asked how wedding planning was going. My throat tightened. I knelt beside him, hugged him tight, and whispered that no matter what happened, I would never abandon him. In that moment, I knew the engagement was over. I couldn't marry someone who demanded I betray the person who had been my anchor for so many years. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake in the living room, staring at the ring I had once believed symbolized a forever love. Now it felt like a chain, a reminder of the ultimatum I had been given. choose between the woman I loved and the brother I had sworn to protect. But the truth was clear. My fiancée had already made the choice for me. By asking me to discard Ethan, she had discarded herself from my life. The morning after that awful conversation with Jessica, I woke up with a heavy pit in my stomach. The sun was streaming through the blinds, but everything felt dark inside me. Ethan was in the kitchen, clumsily pouring cereal into a bowl, humming along to a song on the radio. He looked so content, so oblivious to the storm that had nearly ripped through our lives the night before. I sat at the table across from him, and for a long time I just watched him, trying to absorb his innocence. He glanced up and asked me what was wrong, his voice light but laced with curiosity. I wanted to tell him everything, to unload the cruel words Jessica had thrown at me. But I couldn't. Not yet. He didn't deserve to carry the weight of someone else's cruelty. Instead, I smiled weakly and told him I was just tired. Deep down, though, I knew a conversation was coming. I couldn't keep it from him forever. Throughout that day, my phone buzzed relentlessly with texts from Jessica. At first they were pleading, "Daniel, I didn't mean it like that. Please, let's talk." Then they turned defensive. "You're overreacting. You can't seriously let this come between us." And finally, they became cutting. "You'll never have a real life if you keep dragging Ethan around like dead weight." Each message was like a fresh stab wound. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every word she sent confirmed that the woman I thought I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. That evening, I sat Ethan down in the living room. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. I told him the truth that Jessica didn't want him to live with us if we got married. His face fell instantly, and the sparkle in his eyes dimmed in a way that shattered me. For a moment, he was silent, and then he whispered, "She doesn't want me." The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. I rushed to his side and held his hand, telling him firmly that it didn't matter what she wanted, that I would never leave him behind. Tears welled in his eyes, and he muttered that he didn't want to ruin my life. Hearing those words broke me completely. I hugged him tight and told him the truth, that he had never ruined my life, that he was my life, and that anyone who couldn't see his worth didn't deserve to be part of ours. Over the next week, the situation spiraled. Jessica called constantly, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between apologies and ultimatums. At one point, she even showed up at our house. I opened the door to find her standing there with her makeup smeared, her eyes red from crying. She begged me to listen, saying she was just overwhelmed, that she didn't mean what she said. For a brief moment, I almost let myself believe her. But then Ethan wheeled himself into the hallway, and Jessica's face hardened just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for me to see it. She couldn't hide the disdain, the calculation in her eyes. That was all the reminder I needed. I told her to leave, and when she protested, I closed the door in her face. It wasn't easy. Ending an engagement is not just about losing a partner. It's about unraveling every plan, every dream, every version of the future you had built in your head. I had imagined a life with Jessica, children maybe, family holidays, growing old together. Now all of that was gone, replaced by an aching emptiness. At night, when Ethan had gone to bed, I would sit alone in the dark, staring at the ring I'd once believed represented forever. I thought of the moments Jessica and I had shared, the laughs, the kisses, the quiet nights, and each memory felt like a lie now, poisoned by the truth she had revealed. The fallout spread quickly to our families. Jessica told her parents a version of the story that painted me as unreasonable, claiming I had chosen my brother over building a life with her. Her mother called me, her voice sharp, demanding to know why I was throwing away her daughter's future. When I explained what Jessica had asked of me, she dismissed it, saying I was being dramatic and that any sensible man would prioritize his marriage over a sibling. That comment nearly made me explode. It was clear where Jessica had learned her cold pragmatism from a family that saw relationships as transactions, as things to be bargained and negotiated. My mom, on the other hand, was supportive. When I finally told her the full story, she cried. She said she had always suspected Jessica didn't truly understand what it meant to be part of our family, and now it was clear. She hugged Ethan and me, telling us that we only had each other, and that was enough. Her words soothed some of the ache, but they also reminded me of the weight I carried. I wasn't just a brother. I was a caretaker, a stand-in father, and in some ways, the anchor holding our fractured little family together. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed something remarkable. Ethan began to change. He stopped apologizing for his existence. He started smiling more, cracking jokes again, even teasing me about my terrible cooking. One night, as we were watching a movie, he turned to me and said, I'm glad you chose me, Dan. I don't know what I'd do without you. My throat tightened, and I realized that this whole ordeal, as painful as it was, had strengthened our bond even more. Still, the heartbreak lingered. I would lie awake some nights, wondering if I had made a mistake, if I had let go of the chance at love because I couldn't compromise. But then I would hear Ethan shifting in his room, the soft hum of his chair, the quiet reminder of his presence, and I knew the truth. Love that demands betrayal is not love at all. Jessica had asked me to cut away a part of myself, and in saying no, I had saved more than just my brother. I had saved my own soul. The weeks after the breakup felt like a strange kind of limbo. On one hand, I had clarity. I knew I had made the right choice, and I felt lighter in some ways. But on the other hand, the silence left behind by Jessica's absence was suffocating. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for my phone, almost expecting her name to light up the screen. Even when she wasn't there, the echoes of her voice haunted me. Love doesn't just disappear overnight. Even when it's poisoned by betrayal, it lingers like smoke after a fire, clinging to everything it touches. Meanwhile, the world around me was not as understanding as I had hoped. Friends who had once cheered for our engagement began drifting away, either because they didn't want to take sides or because they quietly believed Jessica had been right. Some of them told me bluntly that I was being foolish, that love requires sacrifice, and that Ethan's needs would always chain me down. Each time I heard those words, it was like a slap across the face. I didn't bother arguing anymore. I just let those friendships die a quiet death, realizing that anyone who couldn't understand my loyalty to my brother had never really understood me at all. The hardest part, though, was when Jessica herself tried one last time to claw her way back into my life. It was a rainy Thursday evening, and Ethan and I were finishing dinner when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find her standing there, drenched from the storm. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. For a moment, I felt my heart stutter in my chest. She looked so fragile, so human, not the cold and selfish woman I had seen weeks earlier. She begged me to listen, begged me to forgive her. She said she had been under stress, that she didn't mean to say those things, that she was scared of the responsibility and had lashed out. For a moment, I wavered. I wanted so badly to believe her, to believe that the woman I had fallen in love with was still there under all that fear and cruelty. But then Ethan wheeled himself into the room, and Jessica's eyes flicked to him, and in that brief second, I saw it the same flicker of disdain, the same quiet resentment. She might have been sorry for losing me, but she wasn't sorry for what she had said about him. Her apology was not about Ethan. It was about herself, about wanting back the life she had planned. My chest hardened. I told her I couldn't marry someone who saw my brother as disposable, who saw his existence as a burden. Her tears turned to anger in an instant, and she hissed that I was throwing my life away for someone who would never give me anything back. Then she stormed off into the rain, and that was the last time I ever saw her in person. After she left, Ethan looked at me quietly and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I shook my head. "Not for a second," I told him. "You're my brother. You're my family. I don't regret protecting you. I only regret wasting my time on someone who couldn't see your worth." He smiled then, a small, quiet smile that carried more strength than most people would show in a lifetime. But the fallout didn't end there. Word spread quickly, and before long, whispers reached me from mutual friends, from neighbors, even from Jessica's relatives. Some of them painted me as a saint, others as a fool. I became the guy who left his fiancée for his disabled brother. At work, people asked me questions with wide eyes, like they were poking at a wound just to see how I'd flinch. I kept my answers short, but inside, every whisper felt like a reminder of what I had lost. Not just Jessica, but the version of my life I had believed in. Still, as painful as it was, I began to find new strength in the routine Ethan and I built together. We started cooking more meals at home, experimenting with recipes that often turned into disasters, but left us laughing until our sides hurt. On weekends, we rolled through the park, talking about everything from sports to philosophy. He confessed that he sometimes feared I'd resent him one day, and I looked him in the eyes and told him the truth. He had given me more purpose and loyalty than anyone else ever had. He didn't ruin my life. He gave it meaning. Nights were still the hardest. Sometimes I would dream of Jessica, of the life we had almost built, and I would wake up with my heart pounding, my chest aching with loss. But then I'd hear Ethan stirring in the next room, humming to himself as he played late-night games, and I would remember why I had chosen the path I did. Love without compassion is empty. A marriage built on ultimatums is doomed. I knew I had walked away from disaster, even if it didn't always feel like it. The truth I began to realize was this: Family is not defined by blood alone, nor by romance, but by the people who stand with you when the world demands you abandon them. Ethan had stood with me through every heartbreak, every disappointment, and I had done the same for him. Jessica had tried to sever that bond for the sake of her comfort, and by walking away from her, I had proven that our bond could not be broken. And though I still grieved, though I still wrestled with loneliness, a small ember of pride burned quietly inside me. I had chosen love, the kind of love that doesn't demand conditions, the kind that holds steady when everything else falls apart. And deep down, I knew that choice would shape the rest of my life. Time has a way of dulling certain wounds, but others only grow sharper with silence. In the months following the end of my engagement, I began to understand just how deeply Jessica's ultimatum had shaken me. It wasn't just about her, it was about trust. I had trusted her with my future, with my heart, with my brother's place in my life. And she had turned that trust into a weapon. I found myself second-guessing people's intentions everywhere I went. When coworkers invited me out for drinks, I wondered if they pitied me. When someone smiled too warmly, I questioned what they truly wanted. I carried suspicion like armor, because the pain of being blindsided once was almost too much to bear again. Ethan, though, became my anchor. He sensed my heaviness even when I tried to hide it. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sun sink below the horizon, he turned to me and said, "You know, Dan, I think you did the bravest thing a person can do. You chose loyalty over everything else." His words stuck with me. Brave. I had never seen myself that way. I felt broken, abandoned, even weak at times. But to Ethan, I was strong. To him, I had been the one person who never turned away, who never treated him like a burden. His voice reminded me that maybe I hadn't lost everything. Still, there were nights when loneliness pressed down on me like a weight. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the life that almost was the house Jessica and I had toured together. The names we had thrown around for kids, the wedding songs we had argued about. I thought about the empty space beside me in bed, about the future milestones I might face alone. But every time despair crept in, I remembered Jessica's words, the coldness in her eyes when she spoke of Ethan as if he were disposable, and I reminded myself that loneliness was better than living with someone who saw my brother as an obstacle. Eventually, Jessica's absence became permanent. The calls stopped, the texts ended, and through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had started dating someone new. I felt an unexpected pang in my chest when I heard that, but it was quickly followed by relief. She was no longer my problem, no longer a shadow lurking on the edge of my days. I prayed silently that her new partner would never face the same kind of cruelty I had uncovered. But in truth, I knew better. People don't change that easily. My family's reaction to everything was mixed. My mother praised me for standing by Ethan, though I could hear the quiet sadness in her voice when she spoke of my broken engagement. She had hoped for grandchildren, for stability in my life, and she knew those dreams had been pushed further away. My father, who had long since drifted out of our daily lives, called me once, out of the blue. His voice was rough, tired. He said he had heard what happened and that he was proud of me. It was strange, hearing that word from him after years of absence. Proud. I didn't know what to say, so I just said thank you, even though part of me wondered if he truly meant it or if he was trying to mend something too late. Meanwhile, Ethan flourished in small but powerful ways. He began to push himself harder in physical therapy, determined to strengthen the parts of his body that still worked. He joked that if I could face down a manipulative fiancé, he could at least manage to get better at moving from his chair to the couch. His resilience inspired me. Watching him fight every single day to hold on to his independence reminded me why I could never abandon him. It wasn't just duty, it was love, the kind that binds two souls together in unshakable loyalty. But the world wasn't done testing us. At a family gathering a few months later, I ran into Jessica's cousin, who wasted no time in sneering that I had thrown my life away for a cripple. The word hit me like a fist to the gut. Rage flared inside me, but I forced myself to keep my cool. I simply told him that I would rather throw away every chance at comfort, luxury, and companionship than betray the one person who had never betrayed me. My voice shook, but the conviction in it was real. I walked away before he could respond, and when I got home, Ethan listened quietly as I told him what had happened. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "You didn't throw your life away, Dan. You saved it." That night, for the first time, I began to see the truth. Maybe Jessica's ultimatum wasn't just the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. A chance to redefine what love meant to me, a chance to build a future on my terms, not dictated by someone who saw my brother as excess baggage. The realization didn't erase the pain. but it gave me a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this loss had carved a path to something better. In the months that followed, life slowly began to reshape itself. The sharp ache of heartbreak dulled into something quieter, something I carried with me but no longer allowed to define me. Each day became about small victories, waking up early to cook breakfast with Ethan, finishing another long shift at work without collapsing from exhaustion, managing bills on time, fixing up the house little by little so it felt less like a burden and more like a home. It wasn't glamorous and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I felt like the future was mine to shape, free of ultimatums and conditions. Ethan noticed the change in me. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the summer sky turn orange and purple, he said softly, "You smile more now, Dan, even if you don't realize it." I chuckled and told him maybe he was imagining things, but deep down, I knew he was right. I wasn't smiling because my life was perfect. I was smiling because, despite everything, I had chosen integrity over compromise, loyalty over betrayal. That choice came with pain. Yes, but it also came with freedom. Jessica never came back after her final stormy visit, and I never went looking for her. I heard through the grapevine that she got engaged again within the year. When I first learned that, my chest tightened. But then I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. She was someone else's future now, and that was fine. I wished her well in silence, but I also pitied the man who would one day discover the same hard truth I had, that her love had strings attached. Strings that cut deep when pulled. I knew then that I had escaped something that could have destroyed me if I had stayed. The biggest lesson came not from losing Jessica, but from looking at Ethan. For so long, I had worried that choosing him would mean giving up everything else. Love, stability, happiness. But the truth was that he gave me more than I had ever lost. He gave me a reason to fight harder, to become stronger, to build a life based not on empty promises, but on unshakable loyalty. He taught me that love isn't about convenience or appearances. It's about standing by someone when the world tells you to walk away. There were still lonely nights, of course. Nights when I lay awake wondering if I would ever find someone who could love me and accept Ethan as part of my life. But instead of despair, I felt patience, because now I knew what to look for, what I deserved. I wasn't searching for perfection, just for someone who understood that family is not a weight, it's the foundation that keeps you steady. And until that day came, I was content with what I had. A brother who looked at me with gratitude and trust, a home built on resilience, and a heart that, though scarred, still beat with hope. The story of Jessica and me didn't end in the chapel we once dreamed of, with vows exchanged under a canopy of flowers. It ended in a small living room, with my brother's quiet voice asking if I regretted choosing him. And my answer being no, not now, not ever. If marriage demanded betrayal, then I would rather walk alone, because I would never abandon Ethan. Not for love, not for marriage, not for the illusion of happiness that came at the cost of my brother's dignity. Looking back, I realized that Jessica's ultimatum was never really about Ethan. It was a test of who I was, of what I valued, of what kind of man I wanted to be. And in choosing Ethan, I didn't just save my brother, I saved myself from becoming someone I could never respect. My fiancée told me to kick out my disabled brother if I wanted to marry her, so I ended it first. And though the heartbreak nearly broke me, the choice built me back stronger. Because in the end, love without loyalty isn't love at all. And the bond between brothers is something no ultimatum can ever destroy.